Hello and welcome. We're going to be doing a short Yin Yoga practice today. It's centered around the season of winter, which, as you may well know at the moment, it can start to feel pretty cold, pretty tight. We carry a lot of tension around in the shoulders, the neck. So we're going to do a bit of work to release into those spaces. We're also going to be working along the kidney and bladder meridian lines in the body, which are associated with this time of year in Chinese medicine. A couple of props that might be useful but not essential. We're going to start with some work for the strap, so if you do have a strap at home or something else that would work just as well, it's a good idea to grab that now. There's also going to be a moment where you might like a little bit something underneath the pelvis for a squat, so a brick can be really nice. You could also use a bolster, stack of cushions, anything like that that you've got at home. We're going to start from a kneeling shape, so coming on down. Again, this could be with extra props. If you like a bolster underneath the pelvis, you can grab that now. Keep the strap just within arm's reach. We're going to use that in just a moment. But before we do, I'm just going to start to draw the awareness in. Eyes could be lowered and closed, or sometimes you might prefer a really soft focus and the eyes resting on the space in front of you. We're going to use the hands to soften through the space of the forehead. So taking the hands to the space just at the center of the forehead and then brushing wide. It's like you're stretching through the skin. Not overly pushing, but enough to feel sensation and enough to start to notice how does that part of the body feel for you at the moment. Sometimes there's a little bit of tightness. There's also this sense of busyness. This feeling of needing to do things, particularly around this time of year. There can be quite a lot of expectation that we put on ourselves. Also, just hands meeting the frontal lobe in this way, encouraging softness, space. Next time you brush the hands towards the side, we'll bring the thumbs to the space just on the outside of the ears. And then come to wrap the hands just around the back of the skull. Elbows could be nice and wide here. Fingers wrapping around the head, and we're not tugging, we're not yanking or pulling at the head, but we're just using this contact of the hands to feel a very quiet, natural elevation through the spine. Again, eyes opened or closed, it's really up to you what feels more intuitive. Could you start to sense into the back of the body? You could feel the back of the head being received by the hands. And then soften the effort a little bit. We'll then take one hand down to the front of the heart, one hand down to the front of the belly. How does this part of the body feel quite different to the lofty space of the brain and the skull? Maybe you sense more acutely into the flow of breath now that the hands are resting on the respiratory organs. You start to feel your own breath moving through. Yin Yoga and all yoga practices are an exploration of our awareness. And we start to rest into the constantly moving sensations of the body. And flow of breath is one of those really tactile ways that we can start to draw our awareness in. And this is a really nice anchor that you might want to come back to at any point in our practice together today. Let's take 3 more breaths here. No rush, that's really the theme of our Yin practice. No rush. Nowhere to be. And you're ready, bringing 2 hands to heart space and nodding head to heart. Just a moment to acknowledge the start of our practice. Eyes could open. If they were closed, the arms release alongside you. Check in. Is this still comfortable in the feet? Sometimes kneeling in this way can cause a bit of strain. If there's an extra prop you want to add on, if there's a different seated shape you'd like to take, this is a good moment to swap and change. I'm quite enjoying the stretch for the front of the feet, so I'm going to keep that shape. I'm going to use the strap for the next part of the practice. If you don't have a strap, doesn't matter, you can work without. I'm going to fold the strap in half, so 2 long lines of the strap. I'm going to loop it just over my right shoulder. I'll mirror you here. Use the hand to wrap through one side of the strap and then catch hold of the back. Doesn't have to be a super tight grip, I'll show you here. But you want a kind of even placement between the front and the back hand. Once you've found that placement, we're just going to use the hands to create a sensation of weight through the right side shoulder. Roll the chin down towards the chest, and then roll the left ear towards the left shoulder. And you might feel as soon as the left ear starts to roll towards the left shoulder, is the right shoulder starting to lift in response? Is it slightly lifting up towards that strap? If it is, just working on down, let gravity move through. There might be these tiny, tiny adjustments, chin forwards, back, up, down. It's like we're exploring this space of the neck and the shoulders. Pausing on the exhale. I'm going to start to draw a diagonal line. You could imagine there's paint on the nose, drawing up through center and then drawing that line of paint towards the top right corner of your room. Eyes can follow that line in the paint as you scan all the way back down. Nose turning towards the shoulder and pausing for a moment before taking this a couple more times. Acknowledge, is there a tendency for the body to want to speed up as soon as we repeat any movement? There can be this feeling like, I know exactly what to do now, I'm just going to keep doing it, reps. But the yoga practice, it's not reps, it's curious, inquiry-based movement, and that means we can't go on autopilot. We instead tune in what's different each time you come to these repetitions. How is this pattern of movement slightly unique from the one that came before? Are there certain spaces that you'd like to explore and spend a bit more time in? Doesn't look like you're doing very much, but you might be able to feel some fairly strong sensations there. Let's pause next time the nose turns towards the shoulder. And roll the chin down towards the chest and come to lift all the way back through center. I'm going to swap the grip of the strap, so just passing over from one shoulder to the other. You might swap which hand is in front, that could feel quite nice as well. Releasing in, wriggling down. Different side, different feeling. It's going to be unique as the chin rolls down towards the chest. Start to roll the chin towards the right shoulder. Pausing here. Is there a feeling like the left shoulder wants to start to lift and hug, and could you instead work with gravity rather than against it? Tiny, tiny movements, finding your way in. And then we'll explore that diagonal line. Paint on the nose, gaze turns towards the top left corner. And then coming back the way you came. Diagonal line, pausing in the places that feel interesting. Doesn't have to be a straight line either, there might be little diversions. Long way around, maybe there's a little circle at the top that you explore. Find your pathway. And these kinds of exercises are really, really good to do, especially in colder weather. There's often this tendency, as soon as we step out in the cold, we hug the shoulders up towards the ears. Everything hugs in, we're working against gravity suddenly. It's just a whole lot of extra effort and strain that we start to place on the body. Invitation to release here. Next time you roll, ear to shoulder, pause. Roll the chin towards the chest. And then gradually lift your way back through center, pop the strap to one side. Maybe there's a roll of the shoulders here, adding nice circular movement, releasing up and back. Take this a couple of times. There might be some sighs and yawns that want to come through as well. And once you've taken this a couple of times, we're going to come into our first yin pose, really. It's going to be a standing forward fold or a dangle shape. So easing your way up, the feet find the ground. Take the feet, could be hips distance, could be slightly wider. And then find a bit of softness through the knees. We're going to start with the forearms resting down towards the thighs. Hands could lightly clasp towards one another, maybe palms connect if you prefer. Really feel the way the feet meet the ground and see if you could spread through the toes. We're seeing how much space we could take up on the mat. Once you start to spread through the toes, see if you could feel the weight leaning forwards. And then decide for the rest of the shape, you could stay forearms to thighs. You could also explore pouring the weight forwards, maybe the hands release down, not pressing against the ground, but just releasing. I really like to use the backs of my fingers or the backs of my hands here just to take away any tendency to press through the palms. Pay particular awareness to the space at the back of the neck. I can feel I'm doing it now. There's a slight tendency to lift. We always want to hold the head up. We're so used to doing that through the day. But instead, curling in. Head so heavy. This is a real signal for the body. You don't need to hold the head up. The brain doesn't have to organize or tell the body to work. There's a myriad of internal systems that are always happening without us having to really think about them or tell ourselves to do them. The breath flow happens without thought. The cells replicating upon themselves, the blood flowing, nutrients pouring through the body. A sense of balance in relationship to ground. This is all happening without conscious thought. You practice yoga more and more, we start to notice these sensations more and more. This practice becomes an expression of life moving through us. Last few breaths here in the forward fold. In any of these shapes, you can come out earlier if you wish to. Never feel stuck. And find full breath out. Start to bend at the knees, maybe returning to forearms on thighs, a little halfway house. You could spend a bit of time here. And then slowly come all the way up to standing. I'm going to take the feet a little bit wider than hips distance. Feet are parallel, even distance between toes and heels. The knees bend just enough to feel the tailbone drop. Arms super relaxed alongside the body. Imagine turning from your center as you start to turn towards the left, back through center, and then turn towards the right. Take this a few times. You could feel the organs spiraling. You could feel the ribs turning, the vertebrae of the spine and disc spaces between getting a little squeeze. And then as you start to turn, maybe with a bit more momentum, a bit more fluid motion, let the arms start to move in response. So how does it feel quite different in this shape to just let the arms flow? And what can be quite a small movement for the torso, the center of the body, can turn into a kind of bigger movement for the periphery, the limbs, the arms in this case. If you're working with eyes open, you could play with resting onto a gaze point just behind you again and again. And as the momentum starts to build, you might find there's enough movement that the backs of the hands want to tap towards the back of the body. Let me show you from this side. Backs of hands tapping back of body. And it might be that the placement of the hands rests just onto the kidneys there, either side of the spine between the middle and the lower back. Tapping your own kidneys. Reminding yourself, oh, I have 2 kidneys, often. Kidneys, one of those internal systems that's always happening without thought, without processing. The kidneys are washing. So this watery and fluid movement, it's really appropriate when we're working with the kidneys. And also associated with the ears, our sense of sound. So you might notice what's firstly the more physical sound of the hand as it taps the kidney. But is there a more subtle internal sound that you can feel from that tapping as well? You can imagine this shape of the torso. It's kind of like a bell that reverberates with sound. Good. I don't know about you, but this feels really nice for me. We'll take this a few more rounds. And then slowing. The tapping might stop, the arms release. And then the swaying gets so small. There's this moment where you might look like you're not moving, but you can feel there's this tiny echo of movement in the body. And you come to find stillness. Rest 2 hands towards the lower belly. This is the lower dantian in Qigong practices. How does it feel for that space to receive the contact at the palms? And how can the palms get to know that energetic center of the body through touch? Good, last couple of breaths. Releasing arms down when you're ready. Next, yin shape. We're going to take a yin squat. This is where you might like your brick or your bolster or something beneath the pelvis. We're going to take the feet nice and wide. Toes turn out, heels turn in. You could place the block just between the feet. And then come on down, releasing the pelvis onto that block or prop. Some of you might be very, very comfortable in a squat, in which case you might not need anything underneath the pelvis. You could just rest the arms down. A few options for the hands. You might like to feel the fingertips in contact with something. This is a slightly quieter version of the shape. There's a little bit more flexion through the spine. The chin could even nod towards the chest here. I'm feeling a very slight feeling of resistance between the outer arms and the inner legs. You might also prefer that more outward gaze, more typical Malasana squat with the palms connected at heart center. In this shape, the eye line might rest on the horizon. You could find a very soft point to focus the eyes on. This is a yin shape, so we're not looking for our maximum amount of effort. Actually, we're looking to step back from that maximum. A good guide for the yin practice is to work at around 2/3 of our maximum effort. So tune in, notice, is the body starting to strain or shake? Often that can be a sign that we might be working a little bit too hard. Could you scale it back? Could you use more props? Could you use more contact to ground? And then we find a version of the shape that feels sustainable. We could stay in the shape. We're going to spend just over a minute here. I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to leave you in silence for this next minute. Maybe you choose one of those internal movements to anchor the awareness into, whether that's the flow of breath, the sense of contact to ground through the feet or the pelvis. One more minute here. And so we come to the end of this shape, maybe acknowledging the feeling can change with time. It can almost feel like a completely different pose by the time we've spent a few minutes here. So just tuning in, how does this shape feel? Also acknowledging any kind of feelings of irritation, discomfort. That's part of the practice as well. We start to notice these things. And acknowledge that they're moving through as well. Last breath. Good. Releasing hands to ground. If you used a prop underneath the pelvis, you could slide that away to one side. Let the legs release down towards the ground. You might lengthen the legs out long here. Bring the palms to the thighs and just take a moment to run down through the length of the legs. Body meets the ground. I'm going to close our practice in a Shavasana. I'm going to suggest an internal rotation for the thighs here. We've just spent quite a lot of time in external rotation, Malasana. So my suggestion is actually to come to a supported rest. Releasing back body down to ground. Stepping the feet about as wide as your mat. And then rolling the knees in towards one another. Find this weighted support between the legs, making contact. And then rest the palms to the lower belly. You might shuffle, you might adjust as you get here. Sometimes this first shape we land in isn't quite right, so there's a period of tuning in. You might sigh. See if you can feel the lower jaw releasing from the upper jaw. Every muscle of the face widening as well. And closing our practice with a poem by Ada Limon. It's called Dead Stars. Out here there's a bowing even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute, it's almost in another year. I am a half of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash. the rolling containers a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bin, until you say, man, we should really learn some new constellations. And it's true, we keep forgetting about Antlia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerta, Hydra, Lyra, Lynx. But mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust and I wish to reclaim the rising. To lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you towards what's larger within us, toward how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses and flesh and said no to the rising tides, stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land? What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth? If we declared a clean night? If we stopped being terrified? If we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big, people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out after all of this is over. Letting this practice be a reminder of your own aliveness. A reawakening of your sensory experience. It really starts to uncover the intricacies and the detail of not just you and your body, but the world around us. And even when it's dark, even when it's cold, even when it feels more challenging to move our bodies in the very free, carefree way that we do in the warm-ups. You can stay in Shavasana as long as you like. And if you'd like to close together, you could begin to ease your way up through seated, rolling, wriggling to get there. Any comfortable seat. Stacking head over heart, over belly. And then resting the hands to the front surface of the body, not thinking too much, but just placing them where feels good. Receiving breath in and releasing the effort on the breath out. Head might lower to heart, body to earth. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed the practice. Let me know how you got on. I would love to hear from you. See you soon.